Beds in Minecraft are a very useful item that lets you sleep through the night. But what if I told you that's not what beds do, and the actual effects of beds are far more sinister? Okay, no, that's kind of hyperbole. But would you be surprised if I told you that there are people who actually go back and play versions of the game, really old versions of the game, specifically because there are no beds in those versions? And I do think some of the reasons that those people have for why they don't like beds are actually kind of valid. And I think there's a genuine conversation to be had around this item. I mean, imagine you're playing this new indie game called Minecraft. And this is a game where you can, break and place blocks, you can craft items, find resources. But when you start playing, after a short while, you see that the world starts to suddenly get dark in these waves that are literally like washing over. Like some terrible, clock is ticking down and telling you that you only have a little bit of time to live and that you have to find shelter very quickly. And this is something that happens every so often in the game, the day-night cycle. Night comes and you have to hide or defend yourself from all the mobs that come out. And this is a central part of the game, You go on YouTube and you see people's videos and there are tutorials that you see about surviving the first night and making shelter for yourself. And it kind of becomes like a really important game mechanic that sort of most of, if not all the rest of the game sort of centers around. But then one day you hear of a new item they're going to add into the game. And this item lets you sleep through nights. Once you have it, you don't have to deal with them anymore. It also lets you reset your spawn point, and it has infinite uses. So what is this item, you're thinking? It must be like a super crazy endgame item. Do you have to collect 100 diamonds or go into another dimension to get this item? Is it something that you can only access with cheats? I mean, it sounds that overpowered. Something that would completely change the way you play this game. But no, you find out that this new item is the bed, and it only takes 3 wood planks, 3 wool, and you can get it on the first day, and then you can skip nights forever. When I first started playing Minecraft years ago, beds were already in the game. They've been in the game for a very long time. They were added pretty early in the grand scheme of things. So we're so used to beds being in the game nowadays. But when you do think about it from that perspective that I just laid out, that is kind of a weird item, right? Like that's a strange feature to put in your game when surviving the night was such like a central part of it and seemed to be like a motivator for so many of the players' actions. To add an item that just lets you skip that with very, very minimal effort, that is kind of bizarre, right? But hey, maybe I'm overblowing it. Maybe it doesn't actually make that much of a difference. So to prepare for this video, I actually went back and played Alpha 1.1. This is an older version, and it doesn't have beds. So I hopped in, and of course, the mission on the first day was to find shelter. Now, this is often a goal of mine, but one of my typical goals when I first start in the world is also finding a bed on the first day. But this time, that wasn't an option. I had to find a home, and preferably one that would be semi-permanent at least. I know that one of the counter arguments for what I'm talking about here is going to be, well, beds don't really change the difficulty of the game because if you have to survive the night, you can just dig straight down and then you're completely safe and you can just wait out the night. And that's true. But here's the thing, that's really boring. Now, if you have beds in the game and like the next day, you're just going to go get a bed and be able to skip the nights, you may be able to tolerate that 2 blocks down thing for one night, but you're not going to do that every single night. If you don't have beds, if you're going to have to do this every single night, you're not going to do it. For example, you might dig straight down that first night, but you're kind of bored, of course, and you have a lot of time to kill. So what do you start doing? You add a crafting table, a furnace, a chest to put things in. You start making your little cave look nicer, add some quality of life things like little ladders and stairways up and down. Maybe you make a mine shaft and you start digging during the night. I'm not saying that removing beds makes it harder, but it does completely change the way you play because now you have to wait out the nights. So the vast majority of people are going to actually start doing something productive. And that's what I found was the main difference in this version. There is a rhythm to the game when you can't just sleep. When beds are in the game, you're doing something during the day, night starts coming, and you think, okay, well, I just gotta go sleep. It's kind of annoying, just interrupted my thing, but I go sleep and I come back and keep doing whatever I was just doing. When there's no beds, you can't really do that, especially not at the beginning. There's a natural sort of rhythm, a pattern to the gameplay. You go out at day to get, resources, sugarcane, wood, animals, build things above ground, whatever you need to build. And then at night you go back to your base. Maybe you smelt things, maybe you spruce up your base a little more, maybe you go mining. But it sort of becomes a thing where you're like, it's like a break. Whatever you're doing, you can only do it so long before you have to take a break and switch to another task. And I thought that was actually really refreshing for someone who doesn't usually play versions with no beds. It was kind of an interesting change of pace. And this sort of natural progression starts coming, not progression in tools or equipment, but progression in the things you can do. As I expanded my sort of safe zone around my base, placing torches, building walls, it was like I was unlocking more things I could do at night. So there's a natural movement away from the early game where you're very restricted by the day-night, but then it slowly moves out and you become less and less restricted, the better your little safe zone becomes. And I think that's awesome. I mean, it feels so good to build a cool fortress or castle in Minecraft anyways. But when you have to, survive the night every night, it feels awesome to actually have the fortress that's, it's practical. It's actually keeping you safe every night and you can walk around and you don't have to be afraid anymore. You've mastered this little area of the world. And compare that to the beds and chest base. I know people have different ways of playing the game, but for me, this is just so much more lame. This is not cool or fun. I don't feel like I've conquered a portion of the world like I do when I built my fortress in my alpha world. Another big counter argument that I know people are going to make is that, well, if you don't like beds, just don't use them. This is an argument that gets brought up for, well, a lot of things in Minecraft and probably a lot of other games too. And depending on the context, it is true to an extent, but I don't really like this argument in general. First of all, for a generic reason of that, you can only make that argument so many times before it just does not become a way to nullify any criticism of a game's feature or items. You can't just put a super shitty thing in your game and then just deflect all criticism by saying, well, you don't have to do it, just avoid it, just ignore it. It's still a bad feature. And also it doesn't even fully apply for a lot of these things because they've been integrated into the game in some way. Just don't use beds. Okay, well now I'm gonna get phantoms, which is so weird. It punishes you for not sleeping, for not making the game way easier. And of course, you can just disable phantoms, which, credit where credit's due. That's good that they added that feature. But again, this is something that's been integrated into the game. They drop an item which is actually useful for two things in the games, for a certain potion and also for repairing elytras. So okay, I just can't do that anymore if I don't want to use beds. But really the main thing is that you can't just say don't use beds, because the thing is that beds are such a good item. There is not an incentive to build a fortress as opposed to just having a bed. This base is so much more efficient, so much easier to get than a huge fortress. There's a huge difference between actually having an incentive to build something cool versus just building something cool but there's no actual effect. And actually, if you had just spent a lot less time getting the other thing, it would have been more efficient. That doesn't feel as good. A bed is so effective and so easy to get, and people will choose the path of least resistance most of the time. Now, obviously, a big part of Minecraft is building, and for most things, you have to motivate yourself. There's not an intrinsic motivation to build things. And that's fine, I accept that. But I do kind of wonder what would have happened if beds were not implemented or not implemented in the way they are. It's nice having at least one central incentive in the game to build some sort of defenses or ways of avoiding the negative effects of the night. This is kind of a tangent, but it does tie into the bigger point. Because another thing that alpha does really well is difficulty. It felt really satisfying to have a safe zone, because I was actually kind of like, I felt like I was in danger in alpha. Like, I'm not the best Minecraft player in the world, you know, but I have been playing for a long time, like 13 years or something at this point. So I normally feel comfortable in the vast majority of versions. Like, I'm not afraid of mobs. I can, you know, I know the tricks. I know how to defeat them. Even if I'm not wearing armor, I'm usually like not afraid. But alpha is different. And alpha, it's made very clear that you are never at the top of the food chain. You can make yourself armor, but it breaks very quickly. And mobs are aggressive, and they hit very hard. There seems to be no or very little like cooldown or immunity time after you get hit. So mobs can just lay on several hits within a second, and there is no sprinting. So if you're out at night, you are probably dead pretty fast. But there are some other ways that beds affect the gameplay. One of the interesting ones is resetting your spawn point. Now, this is a really cool and useful feature. I feel that it is a pretty powerful and good feature for an item that's so easy to get. One way that this affects the gameplay that I didn't really think of is the distance that you can travel in a world. Because when you don't have beds, you're always going to respawn back at your spawn point. That's where you have to make your base. You have to kind of make that a safe area. That's your central hub. And you can go out and explore the world, but as you go out further, the risk kind of becomes more. Because when you die, you're going to be sent straight back to spawn. And the further you go out, you know, the longer you're adventuring, the more chances there are for you to die. So it creates this interesting thing where, like, you have to be careful when you're traveling. Like, really be careful. And there's almost like a soft limit on how far you can go. Another thing is the explosions, right? If you use a bed in the nether or the end, it actually explodes. And it can do a lot of damage to nearby creatures. People use this to like kill the ender dragon. It's become a really good thing to find netherite, because it's basically like TNT, but really cheap TNT. So that's kind of like a weird, crazy, overpowered thing about it. I don't think about that too much, because it doesn't change the overall gameplay as much as the other things, in my opinion. But it's just like a weird, crazy like side effect of the whole beds exploding thing, is like they're a really overpowered tool in the end in the nether. Another problem that beds have, in my opinion, is the way that they work, like the actual details of sleeping in the bed and skipping the night. Because here's the crazy thing. Here's what I was hinting at in the beginning. Beds do not let you sleep through the night. They let you skip the night. And that sounds insane. Like, I know you're thinking, okay, well, it's the same thing, but it's not. It's not. Sleeping through the night implies that all the events of the night still happened, but you just kind of get to fast forward through them. But that's not what you're doing with a bed. With a bed, you're skipping the night. You're actually like deleting it from existence. It never happened. You just skip straight to sunrise. The way beds should work, in my opinion, is you have to be in a safe place to use a bed. You can't just be out in the open, because that kind of doesn't make sense. Well, if you're out in the open, a monster is going to come during the night and kill you, right? And they kind of tried to implement this feature in a, I guess, like a more basic or efficient way with the whole, you know, monsters are nearby thing. But this has a weird like inverse effect where you can just sleep outside as long as no monsters have spawned and you're totally fine. But also, if you're in a completely safe base, you can't sleep if there's a zombie outside. Why can't I sleep? I mean, that zombie's never going to get inside of my base. It's completely safe. But since he's just out there, I just cannot sleep. Interestingly, they actually had it work a different way in earlier versions, in beta Minecraft. And I think the concept behind the way they worked here is a lot better. Really old players or people who play old Minecraft today will know that if you try to sleep in a bed in beta Minecraft, but you're in an unsafe place, like you're just like out in the open or somewhere that's dark, you won't get to sleep through the night and you'll get woken up and attacked by a zombie or a skeleton. And I think, again, conceptually, I think this is a lot more interesting because it makes sense. If you're in a completely safe lit up base, it doesn't matter how many monsters are outside, they'll never be able to get in. You should be allowed to sleep. But if you're outside, even if there's no monsters now, you shouldn't be able to sleep through it because you're outside in the open. Now, to be fair, this feature didn't really work completely, probably as intended back in beta. I think if you sleep right when the night starts, you can actually just skip it. I think because the blocks around you aren't dark enough yet for the game to register that you're in an unsafe place. So yeah, it was kind of janky. Maybe that's why they switched to the monsters are nearby way of beds working. But I think the concept, the overall concept that you have to have a safe base first and then you can sleep, I think that's really cool. And I think maybe they should try to return to that. Now, how would I change beds, you know, in my ideal version? Honestly, I think maybe they should be endgame items. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think that would be really interesting. And I think they're so powerful that they deserve that spot of being an endgame item. Where exactly would you find them? I don't know. Maybe they would be found in end cities. But like, I do think they should be something that you invest a lot of time into the game and then you can get beds. It would make an interesting thing where like you do have to go through the whole thing of surviving the night and making a secure base first. But once you're at that place in the game, like once you're good enough to get to the end game gear, you probably have a safe enough base, so you've kind of earned the bed now. Now you get to skip the night and reset your spawn point. And in terms of the spawn point thing and the distance idea, I think it would make a kind of interesting gameplay thing where like your spawn is your starting area. It's the place you have to stay. You can't go looking for another base. You know that your spawn has to be secure. It has to be a good base. And you get really familiar with it. But then once you unlock beds, now you've sort of unlocked the rest of your world. And there could be other ways to implement better bed mechanics. There's a mod for beta Minecraft called Better Than Adventure. And in that mod, an interesting thing is that beds require a new item called cloth to craft. But you can only get cloth from killing zombies. So it's a thing where like you have to at least survive one night or, you know, kill one zombie in order to get a bed. You have to risk a little bit in order to earn the bed. In my opinion, that's still actually too soon to have a bed, but I like the idea of that. But will Mojang ever change beds as radically as I'm asking? Probably not. And I mean, that's okay. Beds are like, you know, they've been in the game for so long that I think the game at this point has just been sort of built, you know, around this idea that the player is going to be able to access beds easily and skip the night. You know, surviving the night just isn't like as important as it is anymore. And hey, the fact is a lot of people don't want to play the game in the same way. Even though I think it was really fun to not have beds and have that sort of survival loop of the day-night cycle, maybe someone just wants to come in and just start building or doing some other project and they don't want to be sort of held down by, you know, the night cycle. Maybe they could do like a special survival mode where beds aren't allowed. I don't know. It's fine. I mean, like I said before, my entire time playing this game, I have played a version that had beds and I still love the game. You know, I have a ton of fun playing Minecraft. I play beta 1.73 a lot, and even that version has beds. It's a really old version, but they still had beds back then. And I use my beds and I'm fine. I'm still enjoying the game. If you want to hear more about how the problems with beds tie into bigger problems with the game, I want to recommend two videos. One is called Minecraft is Bad at Survival by JXC. The other one is another serious critique of Minecraft by White Light. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen these videos, but I just want to point them out. I found them interesting. I made a lot of similar points about beds that they made in these videos, but they also tie them into larger critiques of the game that they had. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say about beds, and I'll see you around.